This week, in OJ25, Christopher Darden puts the prosecution's case on the line when he has the former football great try on the leather gloves found at the Bundy and Rockingham crime scenes. I'm Roger Cossack, and this is OJ25.
Mr. Darden, you may call the people's next witness.
The people call Brenda Bimich to the stand, Your Honor.
V as in Victor, E-M-I-C-H.
Ms. Bimich, who are you employed by?
Bloomingdale's.
Is that a Bloomingdale's credit card sales receipt?
Yes.
Okay. To the right of the 70268, we see the number 2. What does that indicate?
The quantity that were purchased is 2.
2 pairs of Aris gloves?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the style number on the sales receipt indicates 70268. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did Bloomingdale's ever sell an Aris glove style number 70268?
No, they did not.
To borrow a phrase, is that a mistake?
Yes.
The mistake is that the 8 should have been a 3. Is that right?
Yes.
The day of the glove demonstration, the prosecution was putting into the record the fact that Nicole had bought these gloves for O.J. Simpson as a gift from Bloomingdale's.
Is there a signature on the credit card receipt?
Yes.
Can you read that signature to us?
Nicole Brown.
Have you ever seen these gloves sold anywhere else in the United States?
No, I have not. Not these gloves.
Mr. Darden, you may call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Rubin. Mr. Rubin, who was your employer during 1990?
Aris Isotoner.
Okay, what was your position at that time?
I was vice president and general manager.
Let me show you the glove marked 164A, the Rockingham glove. Is this a glove that we showed you during the afternoon break today?
Yes, it is.
Looking at that glove, can you tell us which style or model that glove is?
This is the right hand of style 70263.
And how can you tell that?
Well, first of all, the model was exclusive to Bloomingdale's. It was only manufactured and distributed to them. And because of this particular type of sewing, which was unique to this model, and the way the vent is put into the palm, this could really not be any other style except 70263.
Let me show you what has been marked as People's 77, the Bundy glove. Is this a glove that I showed you earlier today?
Yes, it is.
I'm looking at this glove. Can you tell us the style of this glove?
This is the left hand of a style 70263.
Okay. Mr. Rubin, you said that 8% of the gloves sold of the extra large brown in color Aris leather lights would be
8% of the actual brown. Out of the 12 pair per pre-pack, 1 pair would be extra large.
Okay, so how many in 1990 then brown extra larges were sold?
300 totally available, possibly sold 200 to 240.
I remember Chris being baited and taunted into that, and Chris was hot-headed. But like all of us, because we believed the glove was his, sure, try it on.
Your Honor, at this time, the people would ask that Mr. Simpson step forward and try on the glove recovered at Bundy as well as the glove recovered at Rockingham.
I saw the forlorn looks on everyone's face, from law clerks to, I think we may have had Phil Van Adder there at that point, but to a secretary, and I said, what's wrong? What could have happened today? This was going to be a good day for us.
You can do that seated there. All right. And I think so the jury can see. I'll ask Mr. Simpson to stand. Mr. Darden, which glove do you have?
This is the Bundy glove, Your Honor.
All right.
The day that he had the glove demonstration, that wasn't something that was planned, but the defense planned to goad him into it. They wanted him to do it, and he fell for it.
Christopher, you're okay. but you've got the cojones of a stud field mouse. He said, why would you say a thing like that to me? I said, because that glove won't fit OJ, and if you don't ask him to try it on, I will. He took the bait.
As is our practice with these gloves, Mr. Simpson will have a pair of latex gloves on while doing this.
Handy, Mr. Simpson, the left glove right hand.
That's People 77.
I remember someone looked at me with kind of these sad eyes and said, "You don't know what happened, do you?" And that's when I found out about the glove demonstration.
Also, again, Mr. Simpson, the other glove.
This is People's 164A. Is that the right-hand glove?
Yes, sir.
All right.
I was sitting in the front row. He wasn't really tugging on it. It was sort of like an actor's portrayal of how you put on a glove.
I was there in the courtroom, literally 2 feet away, when he tried on the glove. I was shocked at the incompetence of the prosecution in allowing him to try on the glove without making him try it on outside the presence of the jury earlier.
All right, records reflect that Mr. Simpson has both gloves. Yes.
When Chris Darden decided to, in front of the jury, have OJ put these gloves on, first of all, it shocked everybody that was watching it, but it was a huge risk that didn't need to be taken. He could have had him put those gloves on in chambers, somewhere else, before doing it in front of the jury. As soon as OJ does this, it's over.
They played that all wrong. The gloves, by the way, did fit. No one can get those gloves on when you have latex underneath. Unless you really tried hard, it would have been impossible.
Can we ask him to replace the left glove onto his hand?
All right.
I couldn't believe that they actually went through this whole thing and they didn't know what the outcome was going to be, which to me was another thing that kind of turned the tide as to how I felt about guilt or innocence in the case.
Can we ask him to straighten his fingers and extend them into the glove as one normally might put a glove on?
I object to this statement by counsel.
All right, he appears to have pulled the gloves on, counsel.
Probably one of the biggest prosecutorial bumbles in history.
All right, would you show that to the jury, Mr. Simpson, in that manner? Thank you.
It was a debacle. It was just handled wrong, but believe me, the gloves fit.
Mr. Darden, you indicated you wish to reopen with Mr. Rubin?
Yes, sir. I believe I indicated that in chambers late yesterday afternoon.
What area are you going to go into?
Shrinkage primarily.
The day after the botched glove demonstration, newspaper headlines sum up the damage done to the state's case. The focus of the trial moving from the question of O.J. Simpson's guilt or innocence to whether or not the gloves fit.
My thought was we have to do what trial lawyers have to do. We've got to go back to court the next day and keep presenting evidence.
Yesterday after the demonstration, you stated while on the witness stand that ordinarily the defendant's hands should have fit into the gloves. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And what did you mean by that?
The gloves in the original condition would easily go onto the hand, would easily go onto the hand of someone of Mr. Simpson's size.
We had to view the videotape probably a dozen or more times with our glove expert from New York.
The gloves you saw yesterday, did they appear to be in their original condition?
No, they did not.
And what was different about them?
The primary difference was the fact that due to the tremendous amount of liquid that had been on the gloves for a certain period of time, the gloves appeared to be shrunken in size from their original condition.
there were two things that helped him. One, he was in control of putting the glove on, and two, that glove had been soaked in blood and had presumably shrunk and was hard and stiff. So of course it was hard to get on. But when, I can't get this glove on, this is killing me, you know? He testified right there.
It's a bloody glove. Anyone in this courtroom knows that when a leather glove is soaked in any liquid, it becomes brittle when it dries.
And the liquid you're referring to, is that blood?
I'm not a technical expert.
He's not qualified to answer that question.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. So the gloves appear to have shrank somewhat.
That's correct.
Okay. How much?
Overruled. It would appear, based upon my knowledge of what would occur when gloves are subjected to liquids such as water, that gloves could shrink approximately 15% from its original size.
Good morning, Mr. Rubin.
Good morning.
I thought you were leaving yesterday.
So did I.
In fact, yes. I guess the events... I haven't asked any questions, really.
Ask the question, Mr. Carter.
Let me ask the question.
At no time ever prior to the demonstration of Mr. Simpson yesterday before this jury, you never talked to them about any shrinkage, had you?
Shrinkage was discussed, yes.
You talked to Mr. Darden about shrinkage?
We discussed the possibility of shrinkage to a slight degree and that the gloves could be refurbished close to original size. We were aware that the gloves had been saturated with something and not reworked or reconditioned for almost a year.
Most people believe that gloves, over a period of time, are stretched and they get bigger. So, you know, I'm not a glove expert.
I believe that it actually occurred here in the courtroom when we were looking at the gloves, and for the first time we saw how crumpled they were and how short the fingers appeared.
That was yesterday, is that what you're saying? Okay. But when you testified yesterday, before Mr. Simpson was asked to put on those gloves, you never testified about any shrinkage, did you?
I was never asked about any shrinkage.
Can you answer my question? You never testified about any shrinkage, did you?
No, I didn't.
All right. And today's the first time you ever talked about shrinkage in connection with this case in court, is that right?
That's correct.
Simpson was having probably a true difficulty because that glove probably was shrunk in a position of maybe one size smaller that if you worked the leather, you could probably stretch it out again if you oiled it. But now it's been dried blood for how long?
What the jury saw, and I think what anyone who saw objectively, was that Mr. Simpson couldn't put those gloves on because they're too small.
It looked like he was performing a little bit with it, you know, but the bottom line was that they weren't fitting him.
I don't think you could act the size of your hands, and that's what this boiled down to. He'd be a great actor if he could act and make his hands larger.
He never pushed his hand. He was just moving both hands. It was a setup.
They just don't fit.
Mr. Dershowitz.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you very much, Your Honor, for accommodating my schedule. I'll try to keep it very brief, knowing that the jury is out this morning. We are very concerned about the possible specter of a mistrial hanging over this very lengthy trial. The defendant, O.J. Simpson, has the right to have his case decided by this jury and not some subsequent jury. Yesterday's incidents and events make it as clear as any events could ever make it why the prosecution would benefit if they had a second opportunity to try this case. If the prosecution had a second opportunity, if they could do what when we were kids we called a do-over, obviously they would try this case rather differently. I doubt that we would see O.J. Simpson being asked to try on his gloves. I doubt that we would see Dennis Fong being called as a witness.
The defense posture, their very premise is absurd. That we would like to try this case again because we would try it differently. We would not call Mr. Fung. I would like for Mr. Dershowitz, a law professor, to explain to us how we could put on evidence without proving someone critical in the chain of custody. If Mr. Dershowitz has an idea, I'd sure like to hear it.
I was in court on 3 or 4 occasions. I argued a couple of motions live in court. Of course, I would have been the appellate lawyer. OJ regarded me as his God forbid lawyer, his insurance policy in case he got convicted.
We are very concerned, because we're down to 2 alternate juries, that the prosecution, in one respect, has a no-lose scenario that they may be attempting. Namely, that they're trying to reshape the jury to its advantage by striking jurors selectively. And they know that the worst case scenario is that there will be a mistrial. And if there's a mistrial, they get to try the case a second time. That's precisely what the Double Jeopardy Clause prevents the state from doing.
If we don't speak out about this now, we're not going to have any jurors left.
I am absolutely confident that the court has acted in a proper professional fashion in every instance in which the court has removed a juror from the jury.
Do you think the prosecution really wants a mistrial?
You know, you have to ask them, Fernell. You'll have to ask them.
We make 2 motions. One, that no further jurors be struck for any reason whatever, and that once jurors are down to a number like 14, 13, 12, that the standard of removing jurors is no longer good cause under California law. It rises to manifest necessity.
This is a bold motion from Alan Dershowitz because basically he's saying, Judge Ito, you can't dismiss any more jurors. Well, that on its face is ridiculous, but it does have some merit in that both sides were seemingly picking off jurors that they didn't want, and it had now gotten to the point where 10 of the 12 alternates were gone.
Of all of the motions made by the defense, I find this one the most offensive. This was a motion filed deliberately for inflammatory effect. It has no law in its support. It has no facts in its support. This is a scurrilous attempt to inflame the community, if not the very jury itself.
What's unique about this case, Your Honor, is that the 10 jurors that have been disqualified up to now have not a single one, well, possibly one, but no more than one, has been disqualified for what would be the conventional reasons listed by the California Supreme Court as constituting good cause in the context of manifest necessity. They have not been traditional cases of illness or death or family problems. They have been more in the nature of juror misconduct problems, which we believe are issues of law. And the court has said that dismissal of jurors on issues of law or any mistake of law does not constitute manifest necessity.
Now, the premise is also ridiculous from a legal point of view. No further jurors be excused for any reason at all? Is that so? If Mr. Dershowitz were to know of a juror presently seated who said he's guilty and nobody's going to convince me otherwise, I've got my mind made up. Where's his argument then? It's legally absurd. There's no legal precedent for it. Manifest necessity permits a retrial where otherwise jeopardy would have attached, not the reverse. Mr. Dershowitz has the law standing on its head.
The idea that Dershowitz wanted to preserve this jury makes perfect sense because from the outset, the defense loved this jury and this had gotten out of hand to the point where, we could have a mistrial if we don't do something.
Your Honor, we move that in the event this jury does not reach a verdict, that we ask now for a ruling that we can have an evidentiary hearing at which we can summon the various personnel who have been involved in the disqualification and recusal of jurors, because we believe that there is a basis on the record for our suspicion that the prosecution has targeted jurors, has selectively investigated jurors in an effort to shape the jury to its liking.
The defense knows precisely why each of the jurors were excused. They know precisely where the information came from. They know the procedure that has been imposed by this court in terms of juror investigation. And all investigations are conducted by this court, not by the prosecution and not by the defense.
Jurors would disappear. What did you think?
Yeah, you know, that little song goes through, another one bites the dust, you know, you just go, there goes another one, you know, you can wonder what happens to these people. You don't really know why. You just know you're going home with one less juror in your van.
Lon Cryer, juror number 6, echoes Francine Florio Bunton's thoughts in the journal that he kept during the trial.
We started off this morning same as usual, only now, with anticipation of my imminent dismissal pending, I've begun to start wearing casual clothes to court instead of my normal coat and tie, just trying to be prepared for the hammer to drop.
You were never given any indication whatsoever about why any of these the 7 jurors that were dismissed before you, why they were dismissed?
No, we don't know why, except that there's just cause.
Bailiffs,
you know, in the morning the judge comes and says just cause.
Why am I so nervous is beyond me. I feel I have not engaged in any juror misconduct, but the fact that I'm being offered up as the next sacrificial lamb bothers me as I try not to be overly excited about my possibly getting out of this mess. It was more, I would rather be the person that asks to leave and you just let me leave, you know, than to have you come and tell me, okay, well, we found this and this is the reason why we're gonna let you go.
As OJ25 continues, who left the bloody footprints walking away from the bodies of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman? The prosecution lays out evidence they say points to OJ Simpson. The defense says the evidence is so contaminated, it proves nothing.
The people may call their next witness. Mr. Goldberg, have you been handling this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, good morning, sir.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
People call Bill Bodziak to the stand.
B-O-D-Z-I-A-K.
Sir, what is your occupation and your assignment?
I'm a special agent of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm currently assigned in the FBI laboratory as an examiner of questioned document, footwear, and tire tread evidence. In looking at the detail in the shoe impressions in the 30 photographs which I was submitted, which were the impressions from the Bundy location, I observed that there were certain features about that shoe that strongly suggested that it was a high-end, that is a very expensive Italian brand shoe.
This is a case about blood, always has been. Blood's going to answer a lot of questions, not just the blood itself, but the way we found the blood, the footwear impressions. We're going to be able to identify the footwear.
As you looked up the walkway walking through the bushes, were you able to see any bloody shoe prints on that walkway?
Not until we got right by the body. There's a heel print.
We walked approximately halfway towards the front of the condominium, at which time I observed some what appeared to be bloody shoe sole prints on the ground, on the concrete.
How many sets of shoe prints did you see?
Different sets?
Mm-hmm, different sets.
They appeared to all be the same.
One set of shoe prints?
Yes.
Mr. Bodziak, direct your attention to People's 374 for identification. Do you recognize that?
Yes, I do.
And what is that?
These are enlarged photographs on the right side of the Lorenzo at the top and the lion or leon at the bottom. The bottom of the shoe has design elements which are repeated across the entire sole area as well as the heel. And these design elements repeat after one another across the width and length of the shoe. The same is true of the heel. And by putting these over these impressions, the precise configuration of the design elements, as I had mentioned before, and how they meet the borders where they are visible in this print, as well as the design element and fragments of the border, which were up in this area and made from respective areas of the shoe, correspond. And in the center arch area, there is the name Bruno Magli, as well as the capital M for Bruno Magli, their logo.
They had investigators all over the world doing things, like there were investigators in Italy at the Bruno Magli factory looking for these shoes.
Now, based upon all of the information that you had from your visit to Italy, from the lasts and the soles and the photographs of the Bundy crime scene location, were you able to form an opinion regarding the size of the shoes that caused the shoe prints at the Bundy location?
Yes, I was.
And what's that opinion?
That size was an American size 12 with the European size 46 sole attached to it.
This is a very rare case in that there was nothing exculpatory of a substantive nature in this entire case. Everything pointed in one direction, right down to his shoe size, which is why I got the shoes out of his closet.
Detective Lang, let's talk about those Reeboks for a minute, sir. What size were they?
Size 12.
And were you aware of the size of the, are you aware of the size of the bloody shoe prints at Bundy?
Yes.
And what size are they?
Size 12.
Can you show us, in terms of a demonstration here, what you did to compare the Reeboks to the Bruno Magli shoes that you had?
I took the shoes and matching the heel and the toes, compared the dimensions of those shoes and found that they were of similar construction and were, for all practical purposes, identical in the size and shape. In other words, the person wearing one certainly would be a candidate for wearing the other.
You have identified the Bruno Magli 46/size 12 shoe as the only prints left and right that you are able to single out, correct?
That's correct.
And no other shoe of any manufacturer have you been able to pin to any of these impressions, true?
That's correct.
During the years 91 and 92, do you know how many pair of Bruno Magli shoes, period, were imported through Mr. Grudrich into the United States, forgetting Canada and South America?
Of any design?
No.
Of
these
this
two.
design?
These two.
I only know for size 12, there were a total of 299 that were distributed throughout the United States.
If a person were exiting the scene with some alacrity, and by the way, you talked about gait and stride, there's nothing that gives us much help on the speed in these prints, is there?
No, sir.
Except that they seem close enough together as to suggest if it's one set, no running, no leaping.
I think even if it's one or two sets, they're relatively close together for a person that's big enough to wear a size 12.
So if there was more than one person running, it would appear that they were both wearing Bruno Magli 46s. Is that right?
Or one person went back after they have worn the blood off their shoe, they went back to the front gate area, reobtained blood on their shoe through whatever activity or walking through the blood they were doing, and then exited that area again. So it could be the same person. In fact, it's very likely that it's the same person.
The evidence is indisputable. It was his footsteps walking away from the crime scene, bloody footprints, not running away, by the way, walking away.
Would it be possible for two people to arrange, knowing that footwear, particularly if you're in the business of crime, can be almost as dangerous as a fingerprint? Would it be possible for two people to arrange to arrive at a crime scene in the same footwear, make and model?
Of this type, Bruno Magli, size 12, Solga soles? Yeah. As I've stated, in my opinion, no.
Do you mean to say that it'd be impossible to buy two pair of those shoes in the United States?
You're suggesting that they intentionally did it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and the reason I'm saying no is because most people would do that with a common shoe. They would not be searching for $160 to $180 Bruno Magli shoes where they had to go halfway, to different states at the same time to buy them in the same size. Just, in my opinion, it wouldn't happen. It's uncanny. I don't believe it happened, and I don't believe it happened intentionally or otherwise.
But it's possible.
In my opinion, it's not even possible because it's so ridiculous.
Good morning, sir. We have a couple of requests. First, we'd like the court's permission to measure both of Mr. Simpson's hands. And depending upon that measurement, then we'll decide what we want to do next.
In what manner do you propose to measure Mr. Simpson's hands?
Well, Mr. Rubin is here. He has a measuring tape. It'll be out of the presence of the jury. We just like his hand measurements.
I think in the presence of the jury, if we're going to measure his hands, we have nothing to hide, Your Honor. This is a search for truth here.
Well, Mr. Darden tells me he'd like to do it out of the presence of the jury so then they can determine what they're going to do next.
And of course, the only thing I would say, yes, he did say that, but perhaps they should have done this before last Thursday. Well, the gloves fit last Thursday, Mr. Cochran, and we're going to show that today. I'm not going to debate that. I'm not getting to that, Your Honor. I think we all know about those gloves, so that's why Mr. Rubin is back here for a third time.
Throughout the trial, court TV producers take copious notes called trial memos. Dozens of binders are packed with thousands of pages that detail everything that happens inside the courtroom.
Darden said in court the state plans to have Simpson try on an original pair of Aris leather-light gloves. But will the prosecution take that risk again? What if Simpson grimaces and appears to struggle to put on those gloves too? Then the prosecution is really up a creek. Or should and have the prosecutors taken the position, what do we have to lose?
Mr. Darden, do you want to enlighten us as to what the options are after Mr. Rubin measures Mr. Simpson's hands?
The options are doing nothing ever, again, related to gloves, or doing something later on down the road. Another option is that we may
How far down the road, since we have, I mean, you didn't need Mr. Rubin to come out from New York to do a tape measure of Mr. Simpson's hands.
That's true. It was obvious to us that the gloves from the crime scene in Rockingham fit the defendant. I mean, they're his gloves. But aside from that, today, we would like to have a measurement of his hands. Now, should we decide to go forward with Mr. Rubin's testimony today, then I will be asking the court to order Mr. Simpson to place on his hands a new pair of Aris leather lights, size extra large.
You're speaking of the gloves that the court received by Federal Express yesterday, correct?
That's correct.
All right.
And so we're going to be asking perhaps for a demonstration similar to the one we had last week, except this time we won't have the crime scene gloves, and Mr. Simpson won't have the opportunity at that time to put on latex gloves and jack around with us and play games with us in front of the jury.
These terms like jack around are totally inappropriate.
I agree.
And disrespectful to the court.
I agree.
In the area, plus or minus about 1/8 of an inch in the 9½ area.
All right. All right, that's the left hand. All right, 9 5/8 on the right.
9½.
All right. All right, Mr. Darden, are we ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to have Mr. Simpson try on a new pair of Aris leather lights.
An awful lot of time on gloves. The problem, however, is, Your Honor, last Thursday, the prosecution made a calculated decision to have Mr. Simpson try on some gloves that did not fit. And they are the relevant gloves in this case. We're not here to try to have somebody recover from a mistake they made. This is not anything personal. They're the ones who asked to have Mr. Simpson over there. Now, because they're so wounded, they don't want him over there. That's unfair. If he's going to try on these gloves, he should try them on right in front of the jury again.
The jury believed it didn't fit. I don't think it fit. I can tell you that afterward, there was some discussion about, why it didn't fit. Latex gloves, shrinkage, all of those things. But the point is, it didn't fit.
Concerned about having Mr. Simpson, who seems to be in a rather animated mood today. That is to have him come over to the podium and put the gloves on, is that he will make facial gestures and other types of things in front of this jury.
Well, counsel, the problem is what the jury needs to see is the fit of the gloves. The jury needs to see it. Mr. Simpson needs to be close enough to the jury panel so that they can see him. I'm going to direct him not to make any comments and not to make any overt gestures towards the jury.
And the same for the lawyers.
I'm going to have the lawyers seated during the course of this demonstration.
To allow him to act up in front of the jury is...
I'm not allowing him to act up, counsel. I'm going to direct him where to stand, what to do, where to turn.
Your Honor, the people call Mr. Rubin back to the stand. So is it your testimony that the gloves marked 401 are the same make, model, style, and style as the glove from Rockingham and Bundy?
Yes, they are.
Now, what is the size of the gloves there in front of you?
These are extra large.
We proceed with the demonstration, Your Honor.
Mr. Simpson, would you please step over to the podium? And Mr. Rubin, would you hand the right-hand glove to Mr. Simpson, please?
We have Mr. Simpson back to the podium.
No comments, counsel. I'll direct it. And Mr. Simpson, would you please, however, stand at the podium? Thank you. Turn to your right, please. All right, Mr. Darden, would you have a seat, please?
I'm just trying to see the demonstration.
Counsel, be seated, please. All right, Mr. Rubin, would you give Mr. Simpson the left glove, please? All right, Mr. Simpson, would you show your hands to the jury, please? Front and back.
Could you give us your opinion regarding the fit of the glove on Mr. Simpson's hand?
I think they fit quite well. This is an extra large glove. It was a little on the snug side since these had never been tried on before. But basically, he was able to get them over his hands, tugging at them a little bit that you would normally do when you first try on a pair of gloves for the first time. And they appeared to fit him snug and tight, pretty much the way the gloves were designed.
The decision to have O.J. Simpson put those gloves on in front of the jury had a massive effect on this case. Think about it. Johnny Cochran used it in his clothes, and it is a term that is still coined to this day. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
If you could do it again, would you do it, the glove?
If I could do it again, I'd be married now with 3 kids living in Berkeley. Okay. But I'm not. We're trial lawyers, and we're paid to make decisions. Sometimes we take risks. That's what we do.
Mr. Clark, you may call the prosecution's next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Bruce Weir, please.
Bruce Weir, B-R-U-C-E-W-E-I-R.
Could you describe who you're employed by?
I'm employed at a North Carolina State University. I'm a professor of statistics and genetics. I analyze data, which eventually depends on the DNA. Any genetic entity, if it can be measured or counted, I can analyze it.
Then let's start, if we can, with area G1,
all right.
In particular the RFLP frequency estimations, under the assumption that there are 2 donors to that particular mixture.
So the most frequent is 1 in 6 million.
And that range goes to what?
To 1 in 600 billion.
600 billion?
Yes.
The numbers you've just given us, as far as G1 is concerned, will they be the same for G2?
The range turns out to be the same for G1. The same number of bands were visible in the mixture, so it'll be the range 1 in 6 million to 600 billion.
During your career, sir, have you ever made any mistakes as a professional?
Oh, I'm sure I have.
Have you ever made errors in either calculations or computations?
I'm sure I have.
Have you ever, in your career, asserted facts that turn out not to be correct?
Well, you'll probably refresh me with some. I hope not.
Okay. Item G1 is a stain on the glove where it is not suggested that Mr. Simpson could be a contributor. Isn't that correct?
Can we agree that he's excluded?
And he's also excluded on G4, is he not?
Yes, the profiles are the same.
So for certain mixed stains on the glove, G1 and G4, you chose to include both the frequencies given the assumption that allele 1.2 is there and the assumption that allele 1.2 is not there. Isn't that correct, sir?
That looks like right, yes.
But this time, sir, unlike the other items on the glove, you chose not to include the frequencies of those pairs, assuming the 1.2 allele wasn't there. Isn't that correct?
I think you found my mistake.
Dr. Weir should have been the perfect witness for the state. You had all of this DNA evidence, which was very complicated. This is the guy that's going to come in and tell the jury that there is 1 in a gazillion chance that it was someone else other than O.J. Simpson because of this DNA evidence. This is the guy that's going to tie it all up and make it make sense. And then he gets on the stand and makes a mistake.
I wanted to talk to you a couple of minutes today in hopes of setting the record straight, because I think some of you are left with a misimpression of today's evidence. I think the jurors are going to walk away with a very favorable impression of Dr. Weir. In some respects, his credibility will be enhanced by the fact that here is one of the most renowned experts in the world who's been able to say that he has made a mistake.
Well, let's talk about what that mistake means, sir. Would you agree, sir, by failing to include the additional pairings in these samples and these items, which do not exclude Mr. Simpson, the numbers that are arrived at by you and put on that board are biased against Mr. Simpson. Isn't that correct?
As it turns out, it looks that way, yes.
These mistakes affect only some, not all, of the frequency numbers given by Weir. While Weir's mistakes look bad for the state, logically it should have no effect on the case. But again, as with the glove, form over substance, image over reality.
In the greater scheme of things, when we look at all of the evidence in this case, the mountain of evidence that we have presented in the people's case in chief against the defendant, we're talking about 2 items of evidence that are no more than a speck of sand.
This week, the People versus O.J. Simpson ends with the prosecution trying to overcome a major blunder that might have cost them the case. Coming up, the state tries to link O.J. Simpson's Bronco to Ron Goldman's bloody clothes. That's next on OJ25. I'm Roger Cossack.